Namaskar. I would like to thank Suresh Omiya Memorial Trust and Arthshila Santiniketan for organizing this event. The book we are going to talk about is a densely researched and wonderfully written account of the history of Visva-Bharati, Rabindranath University. In 1940, in a letter to Gandhi, Rabindranath described Visva-Bharati as the vessel carrying his life's best treasure. So clearly, the history of this unique institution is something that deserves to be revisited. Shatidi, your book evidently focuses on the university, but for obvious reasons, you do talk about the Brahmacharya Ashram in chapter 1. Now, there is a perception that these two institutions, the university founded in 1921 and the ashram school founded in 1901, were ideologically integral to each other. The idea that the university was the inevitable outcome of a process that started in 1901. How do you respond to that in your book?
Thank you, Sukalyan. I think it's also very important for me to state here that Sukalyan has actually done his PhD. I was his research supervisor, and he's worked in the alternative communities. That is Santiniketan. Sukalyan, I think this is my primary, one of the theses in the book is that the university, Visva-Bharati, which is not thought of as a university in the standard sense, but as a society, did not develop from the ashram school. The ashram school, which was founded in 1901, was based on the ideas that Rabindranath had at that time, which was largely around Swadeshi, around Arthshila. And the school, as we all know, was, or many of us know, was developed from this idea that Rabindranath had, largely from his reading of Kalidas and other sort of literary texts of the Tapovan ashram of ancient India, as he would understand it, and Brahmacharya as one of the first phases of the four phases that had been thought of for human beings. So the boys' school was thought of as an alternative community also, community largely of teachers and students, Guru and Shishya, and living in close proximity and in nature. So I'm not elaborating on that. As I see it, it was a kind of experiment which was also inward looking, as you know, about developing a kind of self-reliance, what Arthshila, as he calls it. In the initial phases, it also had a lot of Brahminical elements. So there was a kind of, Rabindranath did not break away completely from this understanding of a caste-based Hindu society. So we have evidences of that in his letter to Kunjalal Ghosh, for example. So that's one. The university is based on the idea of the relationship of the self and the other. So it is necessarily looking outward. It is bringing the world and the self together. Vishwa and learning Bharati. But Bharati also, as Rabindranath Tagore points out, could mean Bharat. So it is a meeting ground of the world and Bharat, India. And it was interfaith and definitely a community which comprised people from across Europe, across Asia, not so much of Africa, but yes, America. So I think the ideas that went into the making of the school are very different from that of the university, which was built, which was thought through at the cusp of the First World War. Rabindranath received the Nobel Prize in 1913, and I am of the opinion that also transforms much of his perception in the world. So, as a matter of fact, it creates a perception of Rabindranath in the world, first Asian to get the Nobel Prize in literature, or in any subject for that matter. And Rabindranath becomes, post-1913, a public intellectual. So, as a person who is not just a mystical poet, but somebody whose ideas on politics, on philosophy, on the world affairs becomes significant. So it is at this juncture that he writes that oft-quoted letter to Rabindranath saying that I'm thinking of a kind of antidote to the poison of nationalism. This is just after the nationalism lectures, in which he goes against the current of the times to talk about nationalism as a kind of malaise, as a kind of handmaid of capitalism and colonialism. And it's a civilizational crisis for him, and for the civilizational crisis, the one answer that he would want to do is create a habitation for the world. And Visva-Bharati would gradually emerge as this habitation of scholars, scientists, artists from across the world between 1921 and 1926, definitely, but even after that.
Your book makes it very clear that Visva-Bharati was never meant to be a conventional educational institution. The word university is unavoidable. Your book is titled Tagore's University, but there are letters where Rabindranath appears to be reluctant to use the word university. And your book mentions that it was registered as a society and not as a university. So what does that imply?
Right, thank you. I think this suggests an entirely new way of thinking about, as I said, it is just not an educational institution. The word society, which was Prashanta Chandra Mahalanovish's idea actually, allowed Rabindranath to bring into its ambit an Oriental Research Center, Kala Bhavan and Shangit Bhavan, and a rural center for rural reconstruction. Of these, the fact that all these three different kinds of not just pursuits, but not just disciplines, but pursuits with semi-autonomous modes of functioning could be brought together could not have happened, at least at that point, in a conventional university system. That's one. And Rabindranath's imagination of the university is also very different from, for example, the Banaras Hindu University, the Aligarh Muslim University, all of which take shape. The Banaras Hindu University is much in the sense of the university is an earlier thing. Aligarh Muslim University has even an earlier history in terms of being a school and college. So, but these are largely sectarian institutions. So, Malviji, who was the founder of Banaras Hindu University, is not thinking of a different kind of university. He's thinking of a university for Indians, but it is going to replicate the Western educational format. The same for Aligarh Muslim University. In 1911, the year when he writes Arjun also, there is a very significant essay called Hindu Visva-Bharati. And Hindu Visva-Bharati argues that unless we can get out of this, break free from this complete sectarian ways of thinking, especially about education, unless we open ourselves to the world, it is unlikely that there is going to be any significant contribution that India can make, which is also what he says in the 1918 essay which we had translated, the first essay on Visva-Bharati. So he says, Chitte Shamobhai, Bidda Chitte Shamobhai. So it's like a cooperative of the minds and a cooperative of knowledge. So all of this is, I think, breaking away from the colonial university. It is also probably breaking away from many European universities. Rabindranath is thinking largely of a research-oriented center. Kala Bhavan is also not going to be a conventional art teaching institution, but a workshop mode in which teachers and students who are going to become teachers will work together. So if you have a question on Kala Bhavan later, I will not talk about it now. So I think what is important is Rabindranath's ideas are, there are relationships of course with the West, but he will always talk about Nalanda and Takshashila, which are the ancient Indian universities. But I don't think, even in the ancient Indian universities, the kind of thinking that Rabindranath has on what constitutes episteme, different kinds of episteme or knowledge existed.
There is a perception that the history of the institution is inseparable from the life of its founder. That is probably one of the reasons why academic discussions on Visva-Bharati generally stop at 1941. But your book is the first comprehensive account of the 1940s and 50s. Now, obviously that was a period of transition, a period of uncertainties and instability. But why do you feel that the story of the transition deserves to be told?
I think that's quite obvious, because the institution did not die with its founder. And clearly, this instance with which you begin, that the letter to Gandhi, which says that you have to preserve the vessel carrying the cargo of my life's best treasure. I don't think if a man who was thinking about the end of the institution with his own demise would have ever written a letter like that. So he's definitely thinking about a possibility of a future for the university, for Visva-Bharati. And in a sense, it is Rabindranath's own afterlife that I wanted to trace. You see, if the institution ended in 1941, as has been suggested by very well-known scholars, they don't say this. Implied, yes, thank you. Implied by many scholars who stop at 41, thinking probably that nothing of significance happens to the institution after 41. So I wanted to know what was happening after 41. I think it is very important. Also, the New India Foundation, which I got, the brief for the New India Foundation was Modern India. And Modern India was post-1947 India. And in 1951, it became a central university. So unless I knew what was happening between 41 and 51, and then after it became a central university, there would be no argument in terms of understanding how and if at all this institution was moving away, was changing its course. There was a course correction between 41 and 51, as you rightly say. And I also refer to that in the chapter called Period of Anxiety, 41 to 50. When there is a sense of insecurity and instability which is plaguing Visva-Bharati, the authorities of Visva-Bharati. But there are very interesting instances of people who are pointing out that they have moved away from the original vision of the founder. Vidhushekar Shastri Bhattacharya, which is also once again often believed just went away after that break with Rabindranath. It's not true, he came back. You see, the archives just tell you so many interesting stories which will challenge the received opinion about this institution. So it was in a Shamshad document that I found this, and then I went back to the Visva-Bharati news, and I found it said that Vidhushekar came back during the time when Tanyan Shan was away, because there was a China-Japan war. So he was away in China, and he took charge of Chin power. Right. And then, of course, Vidhushekar Babu being Vidhushekar Babu, a man who had known this institution, the two aspects of the institution, the ashram school and Visva-Bharati, wrote a very scathing letter to the Karma Samiti, which also includes Rabindranath, saying that you have moved away from your original sort of goal of Oriental research. That's what is primary in Vidhushekar's mind. And he says, what about Zoroastrian studies? What about Arabic Urdu studies? What about, these subjects, these languages and cultures which Rabindranath felt was central to the understanding of Bharatvarsha? Where is the study of all this? So they were gradually moving towards a conventional, or trying to move towards a conventional college and the university, not the research. The research was suffering. But not entirely, because Prabodh Chandra Bakchi is going to become the research sort of director in 1945 or 6, and will completely reshape the research aspect of Chin Bhagat following that. And also Nehru's own interest in the India-China relationship. The fellowships that India government was giving would allow the study of Buddhism in a major way. And the most interesting thing, and this is also what people who do translation studies, Rabindranath understands that many original Buddhist texts have been lost in India, but they've been preserved in China because of this long transaction which existed between India and China. So you would have to retrieve those texts. So you would have to know Chinese, ancient Chinese, to be able to get them back. So this completely changes the idea of the relationship between the original and the translation, right? So the translation becomes the original. So all these things were happening in the 40s, right? Kolabhavan has a crisis, of course, but that's of a different, not in the 40s at all, but probably in the 50s. In 51, the authorities of Kolabhavan decide to appeal to the independent government to take it, to accept it as a central university. So this is a move by Visva-Bharati. It's an appeal by Visva-Bharati. And there is a Radhakrishnan committee which comes in 1949 to look at the functioning of Visva-Bharati, and they are absolutely stunned. They've never seen anything like this. I mean, truly, there isn't anything like this then, and even I would say now. So they write a glorious report saying that of course we need to think of this as a national asset, right? And there is a long parliament, so there is a Visva-Bharati bill which becomes the act in 1951 after a parliament debate. So I think these are histories which have not been spoken about still to date. And these are very important histories because there are a lot of myths about what happens after 51. There is a writing by your grandfather which speaks about the anxiety of what is going to happen to Visva-Bharati. And C.D. Deshmukh is probably one person who says that we don't need to turn it into a university. We need to keep it as a research center. If it becomes a university, degree walas will come. Okay, only degree walas will come. So the original idea of Rabindranath will be destroyed. It will become a mediocre university. Said in 1951. Beyond this, I have no comment.
So this, the reference to Vidhu Shekhar and the research brings me to the next question. There are several misconceptions about Visva-Bharati and Santiniketan. One of these is the assumption that as a university founded by a poet, it primarily focused on music, dance and the fine arts. And that research was never one of its priorities. Now it's true that the fine arts and the performing arts represent a very, very important part of Visva-Bharati's cultural heritage and identity. But its achievements in the field of research are rarely acknowledged. Your book talks about the research centers in detail, their research activities, their substantial achievements. So could you please share your thoughts on this particular aspect which is rarely acknowledged?
Right. So Visva-Bharati has his research or Rabindranath's thinking about the research takes shape in primarily two modes. One is the study of Buddhist studies, which is headed by Vidhu Shekhar Babu, and who was also a polyglot. He is a person who knows Chinese, Tibetan, which is inspired by Rabindranath. I have a fantastic, lovely story about Vidhu Shekhar, which I just have to say. Vidhu Shekhar Babu came from, like Kiti Mohan Sen, came from Kashi, but he did not have a formal degree. He was brilliant. And then at one point he said, Gurudev, I'm thinking of, taking the Madhyamik examination. So Gurudev says, okay, take it, want to take an examination, take. He fails. Rabindranath is thrilled. He says, excellent, now you have become the right person to undertake the research, whatever potentials of this university. He knows that degrees don't lead to much. He can't expect anyone. So Vidhu Shekhar Babu's line of thinking takes it towards Buddhist studies and ultimately to Chini Bhavan and its research center. Kiti Mohan Sen, who is also a Sanskritist, has an interest in what we call the alternative traditions, which Namveer Singh calls the Dusri Parampara, which is about the lesser known traditions, the Bhakti tradition, for example. His major work is on Kabir, Dadu, Rajab. So these are mystical poets of what we call medieval India. So this is very interesting and important because this is also the time of the rise of Hindi as a kind of, in terms of its nationalist Hindutva project. This has been spoken of by scholars, but Rabindranath's interest and the interest of Kirtimamshen and later Hazari Prasad Dwivedi is going to be in these lesser known traditions, the smaller voices of history, what we call the minor. They're not minor at all, they're very important. And in Hindi Bhavan, the tradition of research till well into the 80s, Rameshwar Mishraji, was about these alternative traditions. Hazari Prasad Dwivedi in a major way, and Ram Singh Tomar after that, till, as I said, the time of Mishraji, this is a tradition which was maintained. Hindi Bhavan was not a center of study of Hindi languages only. It was also meant as a center for study of other Indian languages, which was probably never it didn't take off in that way. But the significance of the medieval sort of saints is there in the murals of Hindi Bhavan done by Nepathya. So I think it is very important at this juncture to say that the research and the arts went hand in hand. They were never, as far as Rabindranath was concerned, music and art and performance were very much a part of a person's growing up, this mind of man. Man, one hopes, also includes women. But this is it's a pursuit which would have never been fulfilled without bringing in music, performance, and the fine arts, the plastic arts. So it gets known as an all-singing, all-dancing university. Thanks also to Ravi because he takes these troops to various places to do these programs. But we have to remember that Rabindranath is not thinking of this as a culture in itself. It's a culture, the entire thing is a culture. I have a problem, for example, with the phrase cultural nationalism. I don't think Rabindranath was a nationalist at any point.
The effort to build a unique institution like Visva-Bharati was obviously a collective effort in which many extraordinary men and women participated. But in most academic discourses, the focus is primarily on Rabindranath. But in your book, there are lengthy passages where you talk about these individuals, their aspirations, their anxieties, how they contributed to the institution, their personal experiences, their personal relationships, and how even they criticize the institution. Why do you think that this approach is important?
I think this approach is important also because Rabindranath did not think of Visva-Bharati as something, well, there was a vision, but he could not have sort of turned it into a real living institution without the help of two, I think, groups of people. One, those who are looking at the administration, very important institutional work. His own son, Rabindranath, who he calls back from Shilaidaho, who was not happy about initially but coming here. Prashanta Chandra Mangalavish is a key person in this building. Later, Apurva Chando, Anil Chando, and others who are shaping the nitty-gritties of the administration, the structure of the institution. And if you look at the structure of the institution, it is just completely amazing. They have thought about it in all minute details, right? So, in terms of committees or in terms of bodies which are going to look into various things, so the academic council, of which Rabindranath is a very important, he comes for all academic council meetings as long as he's alive. The executive council, the Karma Shamiti, where the first level of decisions are taken, and the Shamshad, which is a court, where it is finally passed. And the Bar and the Podishad. The Podishad vanishes after 1951. And that is a very important thing because Visva-Bharati as a society functions by having members, society members. So you could actually pay something like 5 rupees and become a member of the society. And then you could actually have your voice heard at the Varshik Porishad. So it's an experiment in democracy happening from 1921 onwards. Right? And this couldn't have happened without the very significant contribution of these people. Rabindranath himself would not have been able to, I believe, his own also traveling persons, traveling across the world. It's difficult to sort of attend to these things if you're always on the move. So Rabindranath's vision remains, and perhaps also does not remain in many of the decisions which are taken. He laments that Prashanta and Apurva have turned my efforts into a place where I have to bow my head to the doorstep of Calcutta University. Visva-Bharati does not give degrees till 1951. All degrees are from Calcutta University, all its degrees. But those examinations are Calcutta University examinations. The other group of people, very clearly, Oriental Research, Bideshikar Kiti Mohan, Kala Bhavan, given I think entirely to Nandalal once he comes, but then gradually I think Vinod Bihari and Ramki Kaur and various other students who are inducted as teachers, Shongit Bhavan he retains. He is a Shongit Bhavan. Right. He will sort of, do these rehearsals, and their memoirs which say, Gurudev ki sundar kore bollen, kirokom obhinoy korlen. So girls would be called and Rabi Babu would teach them. But there is Rabindranath Tagore, without whom none of this would have preserved. So later Shailaja Ranjan Babu, Shanti Ghosh, for a brief period Indira Devi Chitran, who has a fantastic diary, unpublished diary in Rabindra Bhavan, in which she says, girls in Santiniketan always complain that they have a problem with their throat as soon as you ask them to sing. And the second observation she makes is, apart from Shuchitra Mitro, nobody can sing to notations. This is Indira Devi. So, and there are people like Punikadi, Nilimadi, and various other very important singers. But Indira Devi thinks that many of them are not able to do what Robika wanted. So, I think Shongit Bhavan is something that he thinks of himself also primarily as a poet and a person whose songs are going to survive. They have survived in a major way. So that, and rural reconstruction by Leonard Elmhurst. So it is important here to remember that he sends Rabindranath Santosh Mutundar to study agriculture. They come back, they're ready to start, and Santosh Babu has the dairy project. But the entire Sriniketan project does not take off before Elmhurst comes. And that is really the 1921 end December, January 22 story, where Shurul becomes Sriniketan. And it becomes Sriniketan also with the substantial funding which Elmhurst is bringing in. Right. So there's this, the poet of the Plowman, which he says that, when I told my parents that I had this offer from the poet, so they said, oh, very good, how much are you going to get paid? So he said, I didn't tell them that I was not going to pay, then I was going to pay. Right, so that's the money which is coming from Dorothy Strait, whose husband is the person who built the Cornell University. So that's where Cornell has a very important holding on Dorothy Strait. Oh, sorry, what? So the person I haven't spoken about at all is Kali Mohan Ghosh, very central to the Sriniketan story. Many people, but Kali Mohan Babu was a person that who Rabindranath met during his Swadeshi years. He was also part of the Swadeshi movement, and sometimes probably part of also what is called armed sort of revolution. He was brought in here, and he was an amazing person in terms of people, what we call people skills. So he would be able to get people to form these cooperatives. They had health cooperatives. We usually think of cooperatives as weavers cooperative or crafts cooperative. They had health cooperatives, right? So, of the many people who are coming into Santiniketan, also in the 40s, are people who are going into Sriniketan. So, I think it would not, it's possible also because of Rabindranath's efforts, but the fact that so many people are coming into this very small town at the back of beyond and continue coming after Rabindranath is gone, and people from across the world, I think is one of the most amazing events of this, of our, the 20th century, of our times, yes.
Elmhurst is one of the people who continue to fascinate me. Of course, he stays there for a very brief period of time, but even after his departure, he continues to play a significant role through the Elm Grant. So do you think that the existence of Sriniketan challenged the elitism of most conventional educational institutions, including, of course, the colonial universities?
Yes, thank you, Sukalyan. It does, and one of the terms which keeps coming back in the writings, many writings, is the Bhadralok and the Trasha. Right, so Elmhurst talks about how there is a huge resistance by the Bengali Bhadralok of doing anything called manual labor. Right, Ota onnoder kaj. So meaning, of course, to the caste hierarchy. So they will not, for example, do anything to do with manure. গোবর সার দেবে তো হাত দিয়ে তুলবে না তো কি দিয়ে তুলবে so this I think is one of the major sort of breakthroughs in terms of a hierarchy of social thinking that is happening in Sriniketan. It is, and Shantiniketan is never an elite institution. I think that's the first thing we need to challenge. It is not an elite institution. It is not a Bloomsbury. Rabindranath does not live in an ivory tower, and its groundedness is something that has fascinated me as I've looked into the archives. So, at no point did it cater to the very rich. The middle class Bengali also sometimes do not want to come here because they're the degree pabe, chakri korbe. How are they going to do this here? So, the people who came here very interestingly were the term that Bengalis have for other Indians, non-Bengalis, right? A boring sort of term, but people from Gujarat, so Gujaratis, Marwadis, people from the southern part of India. They came because they were not het up about degrees. Their minds had not been completely colonized. And they were the people who were also coming in here. So they were not entirely elite. It was funded largely by elites. So the Maharajas, the Nawabs, the Birlas, the Halvasias, the Goenkas, Tatas, little, not much, but also individuals who were giving money. So it was a unique institution which he called public, but it was funded by private people. There was no government grant in Shantiniketan. There was government grant in Sriniketan. Okay, so the government of Bengal, the government of India are giving to Sriniketan. He is okay with that.
So funding.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, of course. Funding was one of the issues that plagued Rabindranath University continuously. So, could you please share your thoughts on the role played by Gandhi, especially after Rabindranath's death, and how he ensured a steady flow of financial assistance to the institution?
Yes. Gandhi, I think the Gandhi-Tagore relationship has often been talked about in terms of the differences and their agreement. But Gandhi loved coming to Shantiniketan, right? From 1915 onwards. He came and even tried to implement some of his ideas, which was about, becoming self-reliant to the extent that you learn to do your own cooking, learn to do everything yourself. Failed. Right? Prabhat Babu has this fascinating account of how Pamartigulo Thara hoye gelo ar sob kichu poche gelo. So Gurudev did not stop it. He said, "Acha, koro." He knew that they wouldn't be able to proceed very far. So there was a Gandhian group in Shantiniketan. Right? Rabindranath was a little anxious about the Gandhian group, which included his own Bordada and various other people, prominent people, and most prominently Andrews. Andrews had come to Shantiniketan after meeting Rabindranath in London. When he went to London with Gitanjali and there were these soirees at Rothenstein's house, people were absolutely overwhelmed. They fell in love with this man. He was incredibly handsome. He could sing in this amazing voice, and he seemed like, and this is a comment that was made, I think, by Darwin's granddaughter, that he looks like God. He looks like Christ. My God. People said he looked like the Jewish rabbi. Many people said. So across Europe, America, there are people who are saying, okay, so this is an Asian who doesn't look like a fakir, who looks like us also. So I think the fact that Gandhi and Rabindranath about were in terms of their personalities, physical appearances, the performance of their selves, very different, did not stop them as far as Visva-Bharati was concerned to becoming great, having a great bond. He gives the university, the Visva-Bharati, to him for as a keepsake. After Rabindranath's death, and this is also after Andrews's death, there are two memorials which are set up, funding. One is the Gurudev Memorial Trust, and the other is the Andrews Memorial Trust. No money comes in. So Mahadev Desai tells Gandhi that you have to go, to be there in person. If you are there in person, people are going to give. And women, as you know, in the 1930s had given away their diamonds and jewelry and money. So Gandhi amasses 5 lakh rupees. Okay? And this is 1945. He does not give it to Visva-Bharati. He says, I will keep this. You give me a budget. Utilization certificate. Give me a budget. They can't do a budget. They call Marjorie Sykes, who says, okay, so we'll have a hall of Christian study in the memory of Andrews. We will have a Andrews Memorial Hospital. And we will also fund the university. Gandhi comes for the inauguration of the Andrews Memorial Hospital. And this is probably the last sort of visit that Gandhi's last visit to Santiniketan. Everyone flocks to him, and they say that Babuji, we have a crisis. What is the crisis? It's a crisis of funds. So he says, funds will come. Don't worry. It's a crisis of leadership. So he says, why is there a crisis of leadership? You have the words of Gurudev with you. Why is there a crisis of leadership? Everyone says there's a crisis of leadership. I think Gandhi's assassination is the second orphaning of this institution, and a more significant one, because Gandhi's person, in the 40s, he commands a respect in India, a kind of power over people that no one does. So Gandhi's death is a kind of huge crisis for them. So the last source of their funding has gone. And then all these native estates are going to go after the 50s. So princely estates are going to go. So where is the money going to come? Presumably it's going to come from the government. The first thing that Nehru says is don't expect much. Our coffers are almost empty. So you will have to start doing also own funding. This whole story of funding is actually a long story. It's not a story of now. But there is, of course, a lot of government support. There is a lot of also bureaucracy which is going to come in with government support. One of the things that Nehru actually tells the education secretary is that do not speak or write in this disrespectful manner to Rabindranath. You cannot do this. Right? You have to remember that, well, whatever they have to remember, they do not remember, and there is a lot of fractiousness between Rabindranath's decisions and the decisions which the government feels are not right. It's not, he's not towing their line. The reasons for Rabindranath's departure are shrouded in mystery and controversy. I do not wish to get into that. But Rabindranath was also deeply unhappy with the functioning of the university mode. So, what was the question? Gandhi's race. Okay, so I finished Gandhi's race. Okay, procuring funds. Yes, I've stepped beyond that.
You have looked at archival resources at Rabindra Bhavan, at the National Archives, and at Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. That must have been a very exciting experience. So you have also looked at the Parliament debates on transforming Visva-Bharati into a central university. What do those debates reveal about that moment of transition, and who are the most important voices?
Once, if you read the Parliament debates, these are available online now, so you can read them. It is surprising that they are primarily talking about various sort of, what would seem trivial, like whether we're going to use the word Upacharya or Kulpati. How much of Sanskrit is going to be retained? Shantam, Shivam, Advaitam, thakbe na jabe. The most important thinker on this is C.V. Deshmukh. He is the one who makes the most pertinent comments. Shama Prasad is the other person. Shama Prasad suggests that it is very important to keep the school as part of the this idea that the school and the university have to be thought of as a kind of unit. Rabindranath may have thought of the ashram school as part of the larger society of Visva-Bharati, but nowhere did he suggest that this is a PG to PhD program. He did not suggest, a kindergarten to a PhD program. Because he did not want it to be another college and a university. It was meant to be a research center. The school was absolutely unique, amazing, right? And at that point, I think even now, the most important alumni of Visva-Bharati have been from the school. And I don't think he was thinking that his students from the school should not go out into the world. They have gone out into the world, and he was expecting them to do so. People who were going to come to do the research could come up from outside. There was no question of a kind of completely a watertight sort of unit of the school and the university. This is my understanding. The other person, of course, who is going to speak is Azad, Maulana Azad. He is the education minister. Nehru speaks very little, except in the last sort of phase when he is accepting, when the acceptance of this as a university of national importance happens. No one talks much about internationalism.
I think we don't have much time because we will have a question and answer session after this. But this is my final question. Your book is free from the rigidities that sometimes characterize academic writing. Mm-hmm. The language you use is conversational, sometimes it's even anecdotal, and that's a compliment.
Thank you.
And so why did you choose this mode of narration?
I was hoping, like many authors do, for a wide readership. This is a completely researched book, but I did not want it to be, or wanted to have that academic, what we call an academic discourse. We know what academic discourse is. Many of my students are here, they know what academic discourse is. So I wanted this university, Visva-Bharati, to come alive for the reader who did not know anything about Visva-Bharati. So this was a tone which took me much time to sort of, arrive at. The anecdotes are part largely of memoirs, right? I have done interviews, and Shamalda and Vyalini are here. So there are two people who I spoke to. Supriyo Thakur and Shubhra Thakur were the other two people I spoke to, and actually many other people. So I have used very little of what is called oral narratives. I've used almost all written documents. I find that more reassuring in the sense that it is not something that is going to become ephemeral or challenged. So the anecdotes, I think, bring alive the story of this unique university. The other thing which happened to me, and this is something that I recall in retrospect, I lived in the past. For about 5 years, I lived in the 1920s, the 1930s, the 1940s, and the 1950s. I'll give you one instance. Rabindranath has gone to Delhi to talk about the shape of the university as it is going to become later. And there is a lot of to and fro, and he's there for about more than a month. And then I imagined, this is completely in imagination, that the streets in Delhi, the roads in Delhi have these jacaranda flowers, violet flowers, which bloom around March. So this road is strewn, the streets are strewn with these petals of these flowers. And Rabindranath is walking on that and he's thinking, Akhon Santiniketan Boshanto. This is the time. And Santiniketan Boshanto, for all of you, for all of us, is such a transforming and amazing experience. It just comes alive in a different way. So you're thinking of the collage, you're thinking of Shimul, you're thinking of those fantastic yellow flowers probably, which I don't know whether they were there then. And this is a thing that I imagined. And I think my imagination, as Virginia Woolf would say, is very important because these are not in the archives, they're not in the memoirs. So it's not in fact but in fiction that you will find truth.
We have We have around 15 minutes for questions and answers. I'm sure there are many questions. So,
I haven't spoken at all about the setting up of the Rabindra Bhavan, which is then called Rabindra Sadan. Nilanjan is here. So, the beginnings of the setting up of the museum actually begins before Rabindranath passes away. It's largely Rabindranath's effort. Alex Aronson talks in his memoirs about how he sort of looked at the newspaper cuttings, but there were memorabilia. The fact that you need to sort of remember a person, and just not in terms of texts, is something that sort of builds, I think, this amazing place without which I would not have been able to do my research. I owe my greatest gratitude to Rabindra Bhavan. All its staff who went out of their way to help me, and the other places were like, more cut and dry professional places. Here, I established a different kind of relationship. Everyone in Rabindra Bhavan made this possible. So you can't do any research on Rabindranath also without the Rabindra Bhavan. It is just such an amazing institution.
So we are now open to questions.
No one's read the book. No one has questions.
You don't have to read the book. Any question on the history of the
Reflection
institution?
on what Sukalyan has said and all the stories that I have shared.
I think you have correctly pointed out that Visva-Bharati is not a university in the usual sense of the term, and Tagore was perhaps a bit averse to using this word university for his institution. But in one of his songs, we all know he says, Visva-Bharati Prana. And what would you say about that, Tirtha?
Right. So Tirtha Brahman also carries this idea of the sacred, but Vishwa-Vidya does not say Vidya, Vishwa-Vidya lawyer. Right? So Vishwa-Vidya, yes, world knowledges, and the meeting ground, a sacred meeting ground of all these world knowledges, of which the knowledge about Bharat is one of the major focus of Rabindranath's thinking. Yes. It is going to be a research center, so Vishwa-Vidya now hole to hobe na. Shivda is here with us. Would Shivda want to say something about Kalabhavan? You have read my book, Shivda.
Yes, I have read. And I thoroughly enjoyed your book for two reasons. One, it is well researched, and second, which you just mentioned yourself, that it's a book that is very easy to read. Because there have been a few attempts before this. Sometimes you are just dry facts, and the facts clog, and the thinking doesn't go forward. In your case, I think you have done it very well. Organized.
Stand up and take a bow on that.
No, I did really enjoy the book, and also in a sense that very often we don't get the sense that these different areas, especially the area of research, the area of arts and crafts, Sriniketan in its broader thing, and these very often look like three separate entities, has nothing to do with each other. But somehow in your book, you also get the feeling that there was linkages, which is very true, and there were individuals sometimes in each of these places who interacted with the other areas. It might not be the same individuals, so you have a network of connections between these three areas, which is, you don't talk about that in detail, but when you read through, any kind of reader who pays attention will notice that. So this is the other aspect which I liked about the book. And certainly, when we were celebrating 100 years, we didn't have any meaningful or even purely celebratory occasions. So your book was the only relieving factor, and I thought it was well timed. And also, like, thinking till this 1961 was a good idea, because I've also stopped a little earlier than that, but I thought taking that story forward was a very good idea. Because, as you said, there were difficulties, and maybe you call the university twice born. It was also a university that died twice. So the first time it went into a coma was 41. The later one was 61, probably. So, I mean, it's also, in a sense, it was born twice, but it also collapsed twice. And maybe we have occasionally come out of it, but I think that was a good idea to take it to 61, because brings in many things which it didn't like totally. There were various things. So I thought these were all very nice things, and we needed a history of the university as separate from the history of its founder. So these are the things I really enjoyed.
Thank you. See, I'm actually a very intelligent person. I immediately solicited so much praise. So thank you, Shivda. 61. Amyoshin, who has reviewed this book, says, why do you stop at 61? The reason why I stop at 61 is it's a centenary year of Rabindranath, and it is also the year in which some of the most important, the key figures, pass away. Rabindranath, Kiti Mohan Sen, Bidhu Shekhar Babu.
And a couple of years later,
Nandulal. But Nandulal actually remains as the last pillar. And they're holding on to Nandulal in such a big way, they will not let him go. They will not let him retire. They'll say, oh, I'm going to extend it. Master Mashin will extend it a little more. So, yes, so that was 61. And I haven't spoken about this at all, but one of the most important departments which is set up in later in the 50s and which flowers in the 60s is the philosophy department. Absolutely amazing. It is the first center of excellence, philosophy department. Shomik has also been a great source of for the book. So I've always called him up when I haven't been able to find anything about Kalapavan, and Shomik has immediately given me his own writing and also writings by others. Shivda's own writings on contextual modernism, which I also refer to in a slightly skeptical way. But I think, I am absolutely grateful to you, Shivda, for this very generous, very kind praise that you do of the book. It was not timed to be 1921. It was supposed to have been finished much earlier. I had personal losses. My father passed away, my cousins passed away, unfairly. So I think the delay has been what we would say like a fortunate fall, like Felix Culpa. So it came out in 22. I was hoping it would come out in 21. But my publisher, to whom I also have a great debt of gratitude, wanted it to be as meticulous as possible. Oh, incidentally, the book is there. You can see it has the murals by Vinod Bihari. This cover would not have been possible without Shivda's contribution. I called him up and asked for images, and he referred to the book which they had edited. So I think many people, I do not wish to bring this as a kind of comparison, but many people have contributed towards making this book. Srila and Opro, whose library was open to me. Manavendra, who I called up often to ask probably questions which were there in my mind. Sukalyan also, with whom I have often discussed many of my ideas, and several others who have in many ways been contributors, collaborators of this work. I think you can't have a good book without your own research, and also without people coming in to feed it. River is fed by many. It's like that. That's how I would think. There are many people who I have thanked in my book. I probably cannot. There's Shyamala and Piyalidi here today, but many others whose contributions made this possible. Some of my research scholars. Arjun has also often helped by providing references or giving me books when I've been looking for them. He's scratching his head. I don't know what that means, but also he has asked me several times. I think the very important thing, so I think these have all contributed in many ways to the making of this.
In a way, I'm happy that you took a long time.
Yes. Yes,
Because something like this needs thinking over quite a bit. Cannot be done in a rush. So maybe those delays allow you to kind of, because I also noticed that you have quoted books which were published maybe just a year back or months back. So it was growing, and I think that was very essential.
I actually delayed my book for that one memoir, without which this book would not have been complete. Thank you. And I think, Shilpa, also, and to everyone, the students are here, you cannot be anxious over your work. You have to let it grow. There is nothing called, racing against time. Don't race against time. Give it the time it requires. I don't mean your masters and your undergraduate. Those exams will come and you have to give them. But if you ever enter into any kind of research, it doesn't have to be a PhD, right? You have to give it the time that it requires. You cannot rush through work. I think that is one of the lessons, my own lessons from my own work. I'm an anxious person in interpersonal relationships, but not about my work. I have no anxiety about it.
So do you have other questions?
Yes. I'm so happy. Rija is a student of MA final year.
Firstly, I want to apologize for not reading the book. And
You can
yes, I
remedy that.
Yes. And I'm looking forward to read it. And my question is entirely wrong, but
There is nothing called a wrong question.
but after listening that Tagore made sure there was nothing watertight about Visva-Bharati. So how can something so flexible ensure progression? If there is nothing.
There is actually no contradiction between fluidity, flexibility, and it also depends, Rita, on what you mean by progress. Progression, you said, not progress. Progression, like moving forward. It was absolutely probably the best thing that existed about this university. For example, Nilima Shin, a great singer, was in school. Bachchu as she was called, was in school when her singing talents took her to Shongit Bhavan. So you could simultaneously be in school and also be in Shongit Bhavan. This is something that the West is thinking about now. The possibility of a learner-oriented teaching, not classifications of in class 3 you have to do this. So you could be in class 7 and you could be in Shongit Bhavan. Shankar Chaudhary came here to study science, right? And he was in Shikha Bhavan when he began this work. Jaya Appaswamy, great art historian, studied mathematics. I don't think there was, and now we talk about choice-based credit system. Visva-Bharati has always had a choice. Whether it was a credit system, I don't know. But it was free, depending on your ability and also your desire. You could actually belong to many. See, Vinod Bihari, when he came when he joined Kala Bhavan, he'd lost sight in one eye, and the other eye was weak. So he talks about this in his memoir, and he says that Gurudev said, in any other rigid system, you would not have a visually impaired person going into Kala Bhavan. And just go and look at the murals if you still can. And they are just completely amazing. I think of the Chin Bhavan, and Shomik and I, we've discussed this. The Chin Bhavan mural, which forms the cover of the book, there is no perspective. Jaigani, how is he doing that? You can't move left and you can't can't move right. So he's standing at this absolutely strange angle to do this. A person who's losing his eyesight. So I think these are possible because these flexibilities existed. It was an amazing institution because there was no rigidity. Students of Pattabhavan know this. They can still, I think, pursue Chinese padha hai. No, Japanese padha hai. Music as a core subject, art as a core subject, long before these became possible choices by the people the powers that be. Rabindranath thought this through. I don't know if this has answered your question.
Yeah, and also probably, the initiative was with the students.
Yes.
Like you said, Bihari. Even that, just heard that Kalabon in the beginning. They were students.
Yes, of Pattabhavan.
They just decided to walk out and go to Kalabon.
He had to watch it.
Yeah.
Gurudev arekta ki watch.
I think Shailajaranjan had studied chemistry.
Yeah. Shailajaranjan actually joined here as a chemistry teacher, for the post of a chemistry teacher. And then, of course, Rabindranath realized, good, very nice. Shantidev Babu was actually a dancer. He took the initiative to actually travel to Dakhin Bharat and many other places to learn dancing. I haven't spoken about Ravi Babu's travels at all, Java, Bali, all these wonderful stories.
I would like to add that on a philosophical level, Rabindranath was very conscious about the connection between fluidity and growth. One of his favorite metaphors is the metaphor of the sapling that grows organically in an unsystematic manner. Because if you restrict it, if you try to restrict it, it becomes the deformed thing that you call a bonsai. These are his favorite metaphors.
Absolutely. He talks about the tree. You can't plant a tree. The reason why he breaks away from the National Council, he says, a tree has to grow. Also about Visva-Bharati, he has this metaphor you may remember. He says, so it's a small thing. It will grow. Don't expect it to be, already an adult. It will grow, it will take its time. I think we've forgotten that slowness of pace is very important. This is a slow pace, which didn't mean that it was a lazy place. It was a slow-paced place. I love the slow-pacedness of Santiniketan.
Any other question?
How much of this flexibility remains today, and do the students feel that this is an alternative place to pursue something which is beyond the curriculum?
Many students present here today, Shantati, they will be able to say. I think one of the good things which has happened with the CBCS is that they can actually choose. If you studied English, you would end up doing history or education. Now, many of my students have actually read or sort of, enrolled for courses in Sangeet, right? There's Bornali, who is a singer here who learned sitar. There are people who have taken mathematics and philosophy. So I think there are certain things which have been opened up. We are entering a new phase about which we don't know what is going to happen. But I don't know, students? Yes? You have a question or you would answer this?
Just trying
yes.
to I want to know whether Visva-Bharati as a community exists in the higher level of studies, but what you are asking is, I think as a student I have been a student in Pattabhavan. So I noticed that as a day scholar, the chances of being involved in those things that are outside the curriculum or the syllabus, those are high scopes that we get in being a hosteler. But when we gradually grow up and then join our PG or UG courses, those scopes are, I think, a little bit decreased. I will give you one example. When we were studying in Pattabhavan, we had this Pithe Puli Utsav. So as a community, like celebrating a month or celebrating a ritual that's present in Patawon till today. You will be able to experience that. But these university things rush semesters, and I don't know whether these feelings are still there. But yes, I would say, like the thing Gandhi Punna, that's still there. And and the most bad thing that I would say that this semester system has done, that we just hunt for holidays, Saturdays, Sundays, we just rush to homes, and this is it. I mean, I think Patawon Shikha Shatra are well situated in this ground that still upholds the community that perhaps Tagore wanted to build.
This is Shomadip, he's also a master's finalist. Thank you, Shomadip, for this very important observation that Patawon and Shikha Shatra is this seasonal thing, which is very important. You know, Bashanto, for example.
I had my Bengali teacher, Chandranidhi, perhaps you know her. She used to tell that she used to tell that Santiniketan and Shalviti is like a white canvas. When seasons change, colors also change.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a feeling one can feel. I mean, that's what we feel when we are situated in open air classrooms. That won't be felt in UGPG classrooms.
No, that's true. Shomadip, that's absolutely true, because this is the core of the camp of the ashram.
Yeah.
Your Patawon is the core of the ashram.
And what we are doing, even in our integrated building, is now like those projectors, computers, and always language labs. But they are not. They are not the things which uphold the community.
Also learning.
Yeah.
The learning in this community.
Just today, I have been to Shongi Bhavan to watch the rehearsals. So that atmosphere, that community, that laughter, that chiming sounds, which we don't get to hear in our classes every day.
In the Bhasha Bhavan buildings. Absolutely. মানে বসন্তর যে রিহার্সাল, সেটার মতো সঙ্গীত ভবনের এই ক্লোজড সুন্দর স্টেজটায় ওর মতো অপূর্ব অভিজ্ঞতা খুব কম আছে. When I came to Santiniketan, and this is almost 30 years ago, I would hear snatches of songs. Cycle চালিয়ে যাচ্ছে, গান গাইতে গাইতে. And there was still in those times, এখনো নিশ্চয়ই মানে পড়ে, তোমরা হয়তো occasionally পড়ো, কিন্তু এই যে মাথায় ফুল পড়া, it's not about charge, it is also being allowing yourself to be part of the sort of world and environment in which our unfortunately children, I can't would have loved to have worn as my scholar Momita is wearing today. Oh, there is hymn. Hymn is part of the richest tradition that we've been speaking about, which is the Chin Bhavan. Right, so hymn is in an architecture on a regular basis, which houses all these amazing art. And apart from that, the library of Chin Bhavan, which has so many manuscripts, they're probably the richest repository of manuscripts that we have. Visva-Bharati is the richest repository of manuscripts till date. It's amazing. Vidushekar Babu চলে গেলেন যখন তখন ম্যানুস্ক্রিপ্টগুলো নিয়ে গেলেন, বইগুলো নিয়ে গেলেন। সো ওরা হায় হায় করছে, বলছে বাবা বইগুলো আর ম্যানুস্ক্রিপ্টগুলো নিয়ে গেলেন, থাকলে কত ভালো হতো। One man who has 7,000 books, a man who writes in less than 5 years 30 books, and not only about one subject, about Pali, Prakrit, Tibetan, Chinese, Buddhist, everything that you can think of. মানে আমরা ভাবতে পারি না, একটা রিসার্চ পেপার লিখতে পারি না। তো and they were also guiding research scholars. So যে রবীন্দ্রনাথ কোথায় সময় পেতেন, এরাই কোথা থেকে সময় পেতেন, স্লো পেস। না, সমদীপ খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট কথা বলেছে, এই যে আমরা রাশ একটা জগতে বাস করি, which is completely at loggerheads with the life which is there in Santiniketan.
That's proving that this university can't survive as a university, better as a community.
ই বাবা না না আমরা ইউনিভার্সিটি হিসেবে খুব সাকসেসফুল এতক্ষণ ধরে বললাম না রিসার্চ ওরিয়েন্টেড রিসার্চ হচ্ছে এত আর জার্মান ফ্রেঞ্চ ইংরেজি স্প্যানিশ নেই ইটালিয়ান রাশিয়ান কি নেই কি বলছো তাই না ইউনিভার্সিটি জেএনইউ ছাড়া কোথাও পড়ানো হয় না চাইনিজ জাপানিজ কোথাও পড়ানো হয় না অল রিসার্চ ফিলসফি গেছো কখনো ফিলসফি ডিপার্টমেন্টে its library is totally amazing. It has books that you will not find elsewhere. The Visva-Bharati library has books. Visva-Bharati library, যেহেতু তোমরা লাইব্রেরিতে যাও না সেখানে এটা বলে লাভ নেই কিন্তু 1990 পর্যন্ত একদম কাটিং এজ বই কেনা হয়েছে মানে যা যা বেরিয়েছে তারপরে কি হয়েছে আমি জানি সেটা আমারও দোষ আমি জানি না বাট truly amazing place. We haven't explored its resources. The Rabindranath archives had existed for very long.
I think we have another question. It's from Sharon.
Yeah. The main theme in the life of Gurudev Rabindranath has been Ananda. I would like to know how far it is followed nowadays here. Can you give us picture?
Absence, presence. No, I think there is a lot of Ananda. Shomadip just spoke about some Ananda which is missing probably because of the way in which we've had to accommodate large growing students. But I think the principle of Ananda cannot really be taken away. It cannot be given either. You either have it or you don't have it. And in the presence in it. Ananda তো সেই অর্থে কোনো মৃত্যু নেই সেটা যদি বাঁচিয়ে রাখা যায় তাহলে বাঁচিয়ে রাখা যায় আবার কি হচ্ছে ask another question.
Can I add to this? I think that Ananda is omnipresent through nature.
That is very true. Thank you, Rita. It is. The philosophical and understanding of Ananda, as it's often spoken about, সেটা রবীন্দ্রনাথের আমলে যে অর্থে ছিল সেই অর্থে হয়তো নেই কিন্তু একেবারে চলে গেছে সেটাও I don't think I wouldn't want to think about it. That's right.
Yes, Sharon.
Just a mere observation that being a student of Pathavan, I've noticed that there's a huge rivalry between the hostel students and the day scholars. I mean, not just in the classes, but rather in the playground or in the Sahitya Sabha and so on. Because hardly any day scholars come to them. So there's a sense of rivalry and sense of right from the hostel students about these occasions.
Your observation, I am not contesting it, so I can't. Yes. না রাইভালরিটা কি খুব জঘন্য লেভেলে চলে গেছে না
Swati, I have a query that is, you have said that Tagore's philosophy was, Tagore said that education, about education that is Vidya or Chitte Samobai. So has this contributed to the theme of the university that is research? No, research and art works here hand in hand.
বুঝলাম না এটাই তো বললাম মানে চিত্তের সমবায় আর বিদ্যার সমবায় চিত্তের সমবায় মানে bringing together scholars, artists, people who are going to contribute meaningfully to this and বিদ্যার সমবায় মানে এটা নিয়ে আলোচনা করা হয়নি কিন্তু ধরো পাশ্চাত্য scholars from the west coming in here and working in close tandem with the scholars here, that is a kind of cooperative of the minds. But sorry, what is your question?
My question is that has that contributed the philosophy without?
Of course. Without that philosophy, you wouldn't have Visva-Bharati. I mean, its initial days, of course, it's like that philosophy which is sort of,
Chitto doesn't necessarily mean the chitto of the individual. It refers to the chitto of the collective. The chitto of the East meeting the chitto of the West. Any other question?
I have a very simple, just a logistical question.
question. I know 15 years ago I could go to all the departments and now I saw these fences. Am I as an outsider allowed to enter these premises, go into the library, have a look, or do I need special permission?
Beyond my pay grade.
Sorry?
Beyond my pay grade, this question. I don't know. I am not
I just don't know. Like, can I move around? Can I go around?
Is a question that I was answered right
What do I
now.
ask? Because I thought you...
I don't.
You don't know.
No.
Okay.
Because I stopped at 61. That's one. Even go to Rabindranath Tagore. Its library is a public library in the sense that you can make a card and go into the library. The Visva-Bharati library, you need to be probably a student here, increasingly now. I think that's how it is seen. And in any institution, I think libraries are meant for people belonging to that institution. About other places, I don't know.
Ma'am, here's a question. That is,
yes.
I can see this thing happening over, which is the time in which the university was built and the time of 1940s. It was independence movement which was going on in the country, and somehow I can't relate that thing to the Visva-Bharati's history, because I didn't see any references. So ma'am, is there anything like that, the idea of Rabindranath's nationalism, which he didn't like about the whole hatred thing of the nationalism and getting towards it, was it any of the thing in which Visva-Bharati didn't contribute, or was there any contribution of Visva-Bharati in civil disobedience movement or Quit India movement or something like a non-cooperation movement?
Right. The institution, of course, did not, as an institutional form, involve itself, but there were individuals who were definitely part of such movements. Rani Chanda, for example, had to leave the ashram because she was participating in these movements. She went to jail also. Quit India, K.G. Subramanian, one of the very famous artists of modern times, speaks about how he was part of the Quit India before he came here. I think the Gandhians of the 1920s were part of what is called Asahajog Andolan, right? The non-cooperation. But the Quit India, I don't know. I haven't found any records of. But I'm sure there are individuals whose records I have not looked into. But as an institution, it's always saw itself not as a nationalist place. It couldn't be nationalist in that sense. And it was thinking in terms of a larger connect. So I don't know. But there is probably a far more important thing that your question implies, which is about politics. Which we will need another session to talk about. Rabindranath's understanding of politics, I think, yes.
Thanks a lot.
I haven't answered anything, we will talk.
But there were individuals, as you said.
Individuals, yes.
I mean,
oh yes, Nandalal is part of the entire sort of Gandhian project. Shaumita has very nice articles on this. You can read the art projects, Gandhi's Congress, Haripura and other sort of projects in which he's using indigenous material, locally available material to make entire townships come up, and great Haripura panels. You can now Google them, Haripura panels, yes. You can see, Nandalal is very much, incidentally, if you think about the figurines, the statues of people, the one person who's there in the ashram is Gandhi. It's not Rabindranath. Right? So this is, I think, one of the most telling things about this case. Right? We did not, he did not want, and nobody tried to do a statue of Rabindranath here on campus. There's Gandhi, there's Buddha, there's Sujata, the Milkor, there's everything else. But Rabindranath permeates the place. I think that's, one of the ways in which one could think about it. I think we had a very stupendously successful evening. I am absolutely thrilled. I mean, this this has never happened to me here in Chandigarh. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, yes.
And Shomini, thank you for this fantastic WhatsApping it has made possible. I see first year students. I'm very glad that you've come and spent more than an hour here and not engaged in various internet and other devices which have turned us into these small bodies which don't communicate with others. Live, be here. I think Shomadip has given a very fine sort of instance. Shomit Bhavane tale jawa jay.
Yes.
পরিষ্কার বোঝা গেছে সঙ্গীত ভবনের রিহার্সাল দেখা যায় কলা ভবনের জন্য শুধু সঙ্গীত আসনের পাশে বলে see it's an amazing place. It will always remain amazing, so you have to sort of discover it for yourselves. Go to Sriniketan, no one's stopping you. Go to the Malas.